Hi, everybody. We're back together with Jeremy Edelman, and we are recording today AP1 Session 7, the historian in their global and local context. So, today the question really is, we're writing our work, and we often get so wrapped up in all sorts of questions that we think we're like alone in our little rooms, just writing, producing. And then there's actually a deadline we have to hand in, and our work enters the public domain or enters a conversation with other historians, with a community. We perhaps bring it back to the people that we interviewed, for instance, and we suddenly start getting opinions about our work. So our work is being received. And I think Jeremy has a really interesting story to tell us today about one example of how the work of a historian kind of really feeds back into community.
Yeah, we were talking about it a little earlier, Marcia. Hi, everybody, by the way. Nice to, I don't know, can I say this? See you all again? But anyway, you see me. Hopefully someday I see you. We were talking about this, and it is true that 99% of the time we don't think that much about questions of reception when we are doing our research and our writing. We just want to meet, as you said, you just want to meet the deadline. And for most academics, for most scholars, their community of readers and consumers is quite small, and it usually consists of other historians, professional historians, peers and colleagues. But sometimes that's not the case. And so the story that you and I were talking about earlier concerns it's illustrative of the ways in which your work can go in directions that you don't realize. And so to think about it as you're writing. And the story is about Mexico. It takes place in Mexico. It's about a famous historian at Harvard University. His name is John Womack, and he wrote a wonderful book in the late 1960s about a man called Emiliano Zapata and the Mexican Revolution. For those of you who've taken the Global History Lab, you might remember the story of Zapata and the Mexican Revolution, but he was this charismatic guerrilla fighter who helped bring down a corrupt and oppressive government and was the kind of soul of the Mexican Revolution in 1910, and then died in a very horrible, almost an execution by the government at the end of the revolution. Womack writes this book about Zapata in the 1960s. It's a great book. Everybody celebrates it. Some years later, a Mexican ethnographer is doing research on memory and oral tradition in the state of Morelos in Mexico, which is the state where Emiliano Zapata is from. And this fellow is up in the villages interviewing peasants about their memories and so on. And he's talking to one elderly gentleman about this man's memory of Emiliano Zapata. And the man goes on and on about what a wonderful defender of the people he was and how he sacrificed himself for the poor. And the conversation goes on. And afterwards, as the conversation gets to the end, this ethnographer, his name is Rodolfo Stavenhagen, asks the elderly gentleman, well, where did you get these memories? Did you see Zapata? Did your parents talk about him? Did your grandparents talk about him? I mean, how do you get a memory of Zapata? And the old man says, oh, this is a very easy question to answer. And he reaches over to a shelf behind him and pulls out the Spanish translation of John Womack's book about Zapata. And of course, the ethnographer was shocked. It never occurred to him that popular memories of something that had happened so many decades earlier could be informed and determined by what some Ivy League professor had written far away. So you do have to be, you can't control where the work goes and how it affects people, but you can think about it. I think this is the message you're trying to convey, Marcia, is think about your responsibilities and your commitments to your readers, right? And that your stories can have powerful effects, not just on you, but on other people's thinking about their own worlds.
Absolutely. I think this is a fantastic story, Jeremy, because it also shows us that, as you said, we have absolutely no control who reads our work and how it's going to influence people. But I think it's also a great story because it does show that, yes, our work actually does get read, and
And
not just across Ivy League universities.
Well, and I think especially in this digital age, right, that where things are much less bounded by libraries and gatekeeping. Our stories circulate much more easily, and also can get abused and exploited in ways that we may not realize.
Absolutely. And talking as an oral historian, one of the things that is also really important is to create opportunities whereby you can give back to those that you interviewed some of your historical creation, right? And these are often also very eye-opening conversations because you get an opportunity to revisit what you have done. And it's not only kind of a gesture of showing respect and gratefulness, but it is also an opportunity to revisit what you've actually written and get sort of the feedback and the opinion of those that you've written about. So again, a very important part sort of the work of an oral historian is to sort of bring back final products to the communities. And this can take many different forms, right? Because you might not be able to revisit every single person, but you could, for instance, then send your final work to the leaders of different communities that you were liaising with during your work.
Yeah, I think that what you're underscoring is important. That in the case of oral history, your subjects are also your readers. That the roles get mixed up in a very interesting way, which raises questions about what the practice of the oral historian and what kinds of commitments should govern them.
Yep, absolutely. And our students are by now well aware, because we've talked about this, that one of the really important things about oral historians is that one should always only promise what one can keep. So if you promise to actually bring something back,
that should apply to all historians. That should apply to everyone.
True.
But I'm glad that oral historians are so conscious of this.
I was going to say, it's just like not even just historians, it's just a generally really good rule for life. But especially for the oral historian, if you promise something within the exchange of the interview, then you have to make sure that you're actually able to follow up. So if you promise that the story will be published, then you have to make sure that you can actually follow up on that. Yeah. And so, as you said, there's like a whole new dimension or different dimension that applies to the oral historian, because the sources speak back, read the final work, and enter into dialogue, as perhaps for other types of history only colleagues would.
Yeah, I agree completely.
All right, so thanks a lot for this session on reception, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Likewise. See you.
Bye.
Bye.